So the next fish, bass number 8, that was a really nice special catch for me because it came in the summertime, and yeah, it's really difficult to catch big bass in the summer. In fact, fishing in the summer in Portugal is definitely the most challenging time. It's really difficult, and so it's always good to get into a big bass. This spot I was using the tweak bait. I tend to use the tweak bait when it's when the water's deeper. There's a few deeper areas. And probably my first choice of lure would be either the bomb or the Enticer minnow when it's very shallow, and when it's deeper it would be the tweak bait or the shad. So yes, it was a deep drop off there. Yeah, on. That's a good bass for sure. Okay, just hooked into a nice bass. It just stays on, lashing around on the top. Hope he stays on. That's a good bass for sure. So I was working the lure basically over some deeper grounds, and got into another nice summer bass. Okay, I just come for a late evening session and hooked into this nice one. She swallowed the hook, swallowed the lure, I mean. So yeah, I'm going to get it out as quick as possible, but I'm pretty happy with this one. It didn't help with the rod I'd had. I'd been using my normal rod, 12-foot rod, for the days before, but I remember I broke an eye on it or something like that. So I had to change the rod for an 8.5-foot bass rod, which I wouldn't normally use. It's one that I had. I'd been sent to test and to try, and yeah, I didn't enjoy the rod, not only because it was a very flexible tip, which I like a stiffer tip. I also found the reach very difficult because I'm used to longer rods, and so going to a shorter rod really was quite a change. When you've caught a fish around a ledge or it's going around a rock, the more angle you can get with that rod by reaching out, the more length you've got to keep that fish away from the rocks, the easier it's going to be, the better chance you're going to have. Over the years, I've had this happen so many times to me where I've basically been saved by having that longer rod. So yeah, so for me, there's no going back. 12-foot rod is ideal for the kind of conditions that I fish in. Also, it's pretty important if a rod bends over like double straight away with a kind of through action, that rod's already shortened as well. I like to have more of a fast action. It has a nice bend on it when it's under big pressure, so it's not going to just sort of double over with a small amount of pressure. So it's for that reason at Samson Fishing, I've been working on a range of long casting spinning rods suitable for working lures. I love working the lures. I like to put action into the lures and sort of vary it and just see what's working on the day. So the first rod to be made in the range was the to-do, which was rated between 30 and 100 grams. And yeah, I've been casting a lot lighter and I've been casting heavy with that one. And that's a really nice rod and suits my kind of fishing in Portugal. So we did a standard version and an extra heavy. Now the extra heavy was basically for situations when you actually need to lift a fish out. I wanted something that you could lift a fish out, still fish with it, it's not too heavy, but you're able to lift a big fish out if it's sort of dangerous conditions and there's kind of a risk going down to get it. In tests, we've actually lifted 11 kilos with it, which is really impressive. I mean, I wouldn't advise doing that, but it's nice to know that, you know, the rod's got that strength to it. The next rod we developed was the Expanse, and that's rated 15 to 60 grams. So it's a similar kind of rod to the to-do, just a lighter version for casting lighter lures. Still got some good strength to that rod, but that kind of rod I would be using in smaller conditions for me. When it's sort of under 1.5 meters, I don't need to lift fish out. I mean, I can still lift smaller fish out on it. Or if I'd be fishing on the south coast, I'd definitely be fishing with the Expanse. And the final rod to the range was the Maximal. It's a much heavier kind of casting rod. That's for casting more overseas, 60 grams to 200 grams. So that one was developed for basically for fishing overseas off the rocks. Things like for rooster fish, snapper, when again you want all the advantages of the long casting, the reach for working the lures or playing the fish, but also without being too heavy. So the idea in this range was to develop these rods to be, you know, comfortable to fish for longer periods, but yeah, with all the advantages of the longer rod. Yeah, the Maximal, we've lifted 15 kilos with that, so it is really suitable for, you know, fishing for those pelagics and bigger species. I'm actually currently developing the range of travel rods. The to-do is nearly ready. Probably by the time this video is out, it could be ready. And they're all 6-piece rods, 12 foot. So they're a proper travel rod in the sense they can fit in your suitcase. Some travel rods I've looked at before, they actually still oversize, and you're not able to travel with them if they're in 3 pieces. So I wanted something that you could actually stick in your suitcase to cut down on the costs if taking the rod was too expensive. So for me, I often take my rods in a bazooka case for traveling. So I do like a 2-piece rod, but if it's particularly expensive, I'll be taking the travel rods for sure. So the next bass number 9, came at exactly the same spot, and the next evening, I caught it in what they call the golden hours, that sun's going down. Yeah, one of my favorite times to fish. And yeah, I remember that catch really well. Again, I was using a tweak bait. As I'd caught the night before, I decided to go back to the same spot. If I don't catch at a spot, I might think to move on somewhere else, try another area. But if you catch something, it's difficult not to return back. So it's always worth giving it a go, because obviously it's a sign that there could be more bass about.
Can't lose them.
Also with this bass, I was quite lucky to land it. I sort of landed it along a ledge, and the fish went straight down deep straight away and along the ledge. And yeah, I could have caught the line on the ledge if I was unlucky.
Got to get it to the top. Really got me on those rocks. Flipping that was pulling.
You know, the bass went down quite deep because it was a deep spot there, and so it's a case of holding on and trying to get the head of that bass up and get it to the top. And fortunately, I could.
It's a nice double figure, all right. Yeah, lovely bass. Been fishing about for an hour or so, and just changed position and just cast a few along a ledge, and bam, this big one hit it. Made a really hard run. I thought I was going to lose it to the rocks, but yeah, just managed to bring it round, and yeah, really pleased with that one.
Bass number 10. I was fishing a spot. It was a low tide, and it was coming up. It was pushing up the tide, and the swell was around 1.5 meters. So it was a really ideal kind of swell size. This was probably one of the luckiest fish, I would say, that I caught in the end, or I could have lost. I was fishing over some rough ground, caught it over that.
For the moment, I'm using the Enticer topwater minnow. Yeah, I'm on. It needs a little ride out here. Rocky bit there. Got it over for the minute. It's going that way. It's a decent bass, I think. Over that rock. Just need to keep him this side of this rock here.
As I was landing it or bringing it up this little channel, I noticed that it was pretty lightly hooked. So I was just trying to get hold of the leader, and I remember the fish just slipped off of the hook at the last second, and I just quickly jumped in after it. And fortunately, the fish was a bit stunned after coming off the hook and didn't move. And I just managed to grab it to get a picture before it got away, which was nice.
Oh, I jumped in after that and got it. We came off the hook. He was stunned for a minute. Okay, this is the one that nearly escaped on the Enticer minnow, 50 grams. Quite some swell, but yeah, tide's pushing up now, and yeah, I'm hoping there'll be more of these pushing up as well.
So yeah, I was using again the Enticer 50 gram which was in that time was my definite go-to lure over the shallow ground. Now it would be between the Enticer and the Bomb. You know, I like both of those in those conditions. I also sometimes use the Stealth Glide in those conditions when it's shallow, but I tend to work that more earlier mornings or evenings when it's dark, when I'm sort of slowing things down and looking for a little bit of a slower retrieve. So as the tide pushed up, I managed to get into a few nice fish that morning, a few around 5 or 6 pound on the tweak bait, but all the bigger fish came on the Enticer Minnow that day again, and the next fish was just under 10 pounds, and again it was on the Enticer Minnow.
That's a good bass, a bit over that way. Flipping out. I think it's decent.
There was a decent fish, and once again, as I grabbed this fish, the lure just fell straight out of his mouth. So it could have gone very different that morning. I could have lost a couple of really nice fish, but fortunately on that day, I managed to land them luckily.
He's on the thread. Okay, this bass was just literally hanging by a thread with the lure, and I couldn't get him. I nearly lost him. As soon as I grabbed him, the lure came out, so I just put the lure back where it was. It just literally fell out, so I just managed to keep the tension on around the swirling waves. So yeah, really happy to get this one, because definitely could have lost him.
Okay, during this film we're going to be doing a little giveaway, so if you're interested in winning one of these Samson shirts, this is the rooster fish version, that's the front, and this is called Chasing Roosters, Chasing Lures. I've actually got the tuna one on, I don't know if you can see it, it's a tuna on the back. And the third one in the range is the bass one, that's the front, it's a black one. And there's the bass chasing a shad there. Now, as this is a bass video, we're going to be giving away one of the Chasing Bass shirts. So all you need to do to enter is just simply comment below with comp at the end, and you'll go into the draw. The draw for the competition is going to be the end of September, to give enough people time to watch the film and have a chance at entering. So up until this time, I've been using the Enticer Minnow exclusively for the kind of shallow areas when I was fishing top water. But over the next winter, I've been working on another lure to the Samson range, a new one called the Bomb. I was really excited about using the Bomb because in testing it over the winter, I just knew it would work. I really felt confident about it. I like to use it in a similar way. I keep the rod tip up and the rod tip tapping. This is actually a Bomb here, this is a blue one, and you can really get that nose tapping from side to side, and it's really quite splashy. So it gives out a lot of distress signals. If they're in the mood, they really love that lure. I remember it was summertime and headed down for summer holiday with a family. It was the first opportunity to test it. I think it was the first session of the trip, and yeah, I was just like, you know, excited to get out there and test this new lure. I remember it was like a beautiful summer's evening when it's just nice to be out there. Obviously you want to catch, but if you don't, it's just lovely to be there. It was kind of like one of those rare summer evenings you can get where there's no wind at all, it's just dead still. You don't get them a lot in Portugal, so you've got to make the most of them, and the swells weren't very big, so I thought, you know, it's ideal time to just to test out this Bomb. I hadn't been fishing long when I got this big top water smash, and I knew immediately it was a good fish. I could tell by the weight of it, and it was just a case of praying that fish stayed on.
It's like not a breath of wind, which is really rare for here. got a hit. I'm on. I just slowed it down over those rocks. Let's go back up around that rock. It is a bit rocky on the inside here. Just try and keep that. Right, if I can just get him over these rocks. He's over those rocks, just hope he stays on now. So I'm going to bring him up. Big set coming in now, it's a good bass. Really nice one.
Fortunately it was hooked well and it stayed on. I think it was the first fish of the trip. Yeah, good double figure. It was a really fat fish, probably one of the fattest bass I ever remember catching for its size. You know, it was I don't know, probably been gorging on sardines over the last months, I guess, but it was a really fat fish.
Okay, so first real session on the bass, testing out the new lures, and they got a really nice hit, sort of about 3/4 of the way in, around the real rocky area. So I was using this new bomb lure, an airbrushed version, and yeah, I've been testing it all winter, as I was saying, and I really thought it looked good, and I knew it would catch some bass, so really pleased to actually get it into some action. So yeah, lovely catch that.
There's not that many big bass around in the summer. If you're lucky to get onto a few bass, they're generally smaller than that. So yeah, so that was a good start to the trip. So if the bomb wasn't working in that place, I would have put on the Stealth Glide. The Stealth Glide I tend to use earlier mornings and evenings when I want a little bit of a calmer action, a little bit of a slower action, or if that's working. I think with bass, sometimes a really splashy action is just what you need, and other times it could be something a bit more subtle. Now the Stealth Glide, you can work like the bomb, but you can work it slower. The bomb will cast further, especially if it's windy. The Glide casts well, almost the same if it's not windy. So the bomb would be my go-to lure if it was about distance and top water. So it's really amazing the different kind of shape bass you can get. This was a really fat one, and I've had plenty of bass that are really long and thin. Some of them have already laid eggs, of course, but there tends to be longer bass and shorter, fatter bass. From what I've heard, a lot of people say the darker, shorter bass tend to live around the rocks and stay around the rocks, and the longer, thinner bass tend to migrate and be more out to sea. I actually don't know, I've no idea if that's true, it's just what I've heard locally in Portugal. So if anyone's got any thoughts on that, feel free to comment. The next bass number 13, that came at the end of the trip. I'd had a really nice trip, caught a lot of bass, but this video is about big bass and double figure bass. So the next one came right at the end of the trip. It was literally the last session of the trip.
This is the last session for sure of this trip. I'm going really early in the morning.
It was really special to get 2 double figure bass for me in a summer holiday. I was over there a few weeks, so to get into 2 lovely bass like that, considering the conditions aren't the best, was really lucky. Problem with the summer is not only there tends to be less bass around, what I found, I don't see that many people fishing. Obviously local people are working a bit more. It's a busy time in the summer, and also the fishing just isn't as good. One of the problems is the weed. There tends to be a lot of weed around in the summer. Maybe 80% of the normal spots I fish are just out of action. So in this session, the swells were pretty small again, and whenever it's small swells, if I get a chance, I like to put on a small lure. For me, I sort of match the lures to the size of the swell rather than to what I'm fishing for, as I'm a big believer in small lures can catch big fish and small fish, whatever. So if I can fish with a smaller lure in the conditions, I will. If it's too big, and obviously I go up to the next size, to whatever fits the conditions. So on this day it was probably under 1 meter. It was about, I don't know, 3/4 of a meter, 1/2 meter the swell. So I put on the 15 gram little tweak bait, which still casts pretty well. You can get some decent distance with that. So if I was fishing a spot, generally I might try at one point a longer casting lure like the bomb to get right out the back to test if there's anything out the back. But I would definitely thoroughly test the inside, and I was working this little tweak, and yeah, managed to get a hit from a really nice sized bass, a good double again. This was a longer bass, and of course a brilliant end to a really nice summer's bass fishing that was.
Okay, so calm conditions with the wind today. Just going to try the little tweak. I don't get a lot of chance to use this little 15 gram with the winds and swells. Good thing about these little 15 gram, you can catch more variety of fish. Plus, you still can get a big fish, no, for sure. Oh, come on. Maybe it's a good one. Oh dear. Right by those rocks. Shit. That is a good bass. That's just saying, you can get bigger fish on the little lure. Keep them through these rocks. It's funny, it feels funny. I've only got my light leader on. Flipping heck. Lovely bass, can't believe it. I think a double figure on the last evening with a tiny little lure. I was just saying that you can get big fish on the little lure and then promptly hooked into this one. That is a great end to the trip, but it's not over yet. Maybe there's a few more out there.